Hey everyone, and welcome to Recharge the Podcast. I'm David Coe. My guest today has a last name that you might have heard before, but she is a force in her own right. She's an author, a producer, a screenwriter, a podcast host, and a deep thinker pondering life's big questions. So let's recharge with Kelly Carlin. Hi, Kelly. How are you? And thank you for joining us today.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. Very excited to be here, and I'm doing good. It's a beautiful sunny day here.
I have so many questions for you. But before we go into all these questions, I'd like to start each episode of this podcast it's pretty much the same way. And the name of the podcast is called Recharge. It was all built off a book that I wrote, and essentially it treats your mental health like a battery. And so think about your brain as a battery. And so I'd like to ask you, how is your battery today and why?
Such a great question. Wouldn't it be amazing if we could ask that question of every human when we encounter them? The world would be an easier place to live in. You know what? Actually, my battery is pretty good. I'd say it's mental health wise. It's at a good 90% today. It's feeling stable and connected and grounded and also free of static this morning. So there was some static that came in, but I know how to let it go and be like, well, that's just a blip in the thing. And yeah, I appreciate the question.
Oh, that's so good. So good. So you have done so many interviews. I mean, you're a total pro at this. And you've had many interviews, obviously, about yourself, which we're going to spend a lot of time talking about. And you've also spoken a lot about your father, George Carlin, who so many of us are so familiar with, who passed away in 2008, and widely regarded as one of the greatest comedians of all time. My first question to you is just what is it like being the steward, one, of that legacy, and then two, how have you really embraced that?
Like everything that we are presented in life, I see it as an opportunity for two things. Obviously, to honor my father and his incredible, what I consider genius, and a lot of people
Mm.
do. They consider him the GOAT. They consider him on the Mount Rushmore of comedy. But I really embraced this path of taking care of my dad's legacy after he died as really part of my adventure of personal growth. Like I take everything on. I think I have a really kind of a growth mindset that I live
Mm.
into. And I saw it as an opportunity to be courageous in my life, to
Mm.
pursue my own craft, which was about walking through the fire of being his
Mm.
daughter out loud in public and even being willing to tell my own story on quote unquote his stage. And being an only child and being someone who was very shaped by his perspective and his heart and his journey, wanting to make sure that his work is respected and known and kept alive. And I had a real passion for that. It was really important for me. And I think part of it too, David, was a way to grieve him afterwards. Like I could stay in relationship with him
Mm.
after he was gone in that way. Because what happened in 2008, if you remember, social media became a thing. And
Yes.
suddenly I was sharing the grief of thousands of his fans,
Mm.
which I would have never happened before social media unless
That's
I
right.
was at an event and met someone or
That's
here
right.
one-on-one kind of a thing.
That's right.
Suddenly, I've got a ridiculous amount of Twitter followers and Facebook people and
Mm.
all of that. And it was this way of me being able to share in the love. Like I
Mm.
really talked about that time as this big field of love and light that was just
Mm.
surrounding me. And I soaked it in and I let it carry me through that initial grief process. And
Mm.
I got a chance to get on a soapbox also and tell people about myself and my point of view and my humor
Mm.
as one does on social media. So it gave me a kind of a safe platform to be like, "Hi, I'm introducing myself.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm the daughter of." And I have to say, it's been a long time now. It's been 17 years or more. Yeah, it's going to be 18 years this year, scarily. That's which is crazy to me. And that journey has changed. I mean, I've also been trapped by being in his shadow now. And so
Mm.
really been working on releasing what I need to release around that, which has
Mm.
been a big part of, I think, the last really 2 or 3 or 4 years of my life.
Yeah. As you just mentioned, and we use terms like the GOAT, which we've heard, genius. These are big terms to live up to.
Yeah.
And then at some point you're talking about your own identity and you're going into being potentially overshadowed. Did it ever feel overshadowing? And how did you come through that overshadow?
Yeah, David, day one. I mean, when I was a kid, my mother and I would walk into a room with my dad
Hmm.
and we would disappear. All eyes on him, all energy towards him. He was one of those people that lit up a room. My mother was one of those people that lit up a room too, but next to the fame or the charisma of my dad, that was hard. So I kind of lived in invisibility my whole life. And it shaped me, definitely. I think I never felt like I had my own voice. I was always very confused about expectations. Expectations were just huge inside my head, not from my
Mm.
parents at all. My parents were like, you can do anything you want, which isn't always helpful, also. I call them the laissez-faire parents, you know? So that expectation thing was huge. Being
Mm.
invisible was part of it.
Mm.
And then a longing always to want to find my voice, to find my path. Really hard to do when you have such an example in your life of like what always looks like success and
Mm.
growth and more success and more artistic growth. So feeling like I could make a mistake or be lost or be confused. I had a lot of shame about that and a lot of, beat myself up about it a lot.
Mm.
I had a lot of anxiety. My parents had some drug and alcohol issues, so I had a lot
Mm.
of kind of nervous system anxiety going on in my life.
Oh.
Speaking of mental health, and it was a challenge.
Mm.
But a lot of it was a kind of my own interpretation of it and my own
Mm.
inability to find my own power and my own voice in a way that felt natural.
And I'm really glad you brought us back to your childhood. After as you were born and just after you were born, your father's career really took off. And so really when you go back in your own words and kind of say you would walk in a room and disappear because your father's he cast a really big shadow and everyone wanted to be all eyes on him as you were saying. It's hard for so many people to relate to that because sometimes, as you're the young one that comes in the room, kind of all eyes will go to you as a child,
And
and
and they would people would be like, "Oh, who's this?" And then
right.
I, ooh, so shy, like hide behind dad, kind of a moment. I was like, "Oh," kind of a person too. But when you watch this person who's looks so organically natural and expressive, right? My dad was not on all the time. He was not one of those people that was at a
Huh,
party going,
interesting.
he was very down to earth. He was funny and all of that, but and very warm with people and stuff like that. But no need to be the comedian in the room. No need to be the guy who does that. But it's also interesting too because I've been writing about this lately. I'm actually writing about my time. I'm working on a second memoir around after my dad died and that journey through that part of my life and really thinking about how this thing that happens. I was about 4 years old. My mother knew my dad was going to be on TV. She sat me down. She was really excited that I was going to have an experience of seeing daddy on TV. And the TV started, the show started, whatever it was, some variety show. They introduce him and he comes out and he's in this small little box. And my little 4-year-old brain did not understand. I could hear him and I could see him. And she said I started crying and I ran out of the room terrified by
Right.
that. Yeah, and I think about that and I think about
Huh.
how suddenly it's like part of my dad didn't belong to me.
Mm.
He belonged to the world. And what's so interesting is I never had that insight until after he died. And a few months after he died, I was probably on social media or maybe meeting someone in person. And they said to me, Kelly, thank you for sharing your dad with the world.
Oh,
And
wow.
it makes me tear up right now just thinking about
Yeah.
it. I had
Yeah.
never thought about that. And I suddenly was like, oh, wow, that kind of makes sense. And I see how that really kind of shaped me because of that.
Mm. Yeah, and as you talk about your parents, because one thing you just mentioned was the addiction piece. And both of your parents, as you say, struggled with addiction, and at times it could seem you were living a double life.
Yeah,
And what
for
I mean
sure.
by that is, to the public, you've got this, kind of perfect family. You're doing great in school, but behind closed doors, it may not have felt that way, right? It could have been a little bit more chaotic. What
Just a
impact?
little.
Yeah. And what impact did that have you on your own mental health growing up? Did that have on
Yeah.
you, right? As a
Yeah.
child growing up? And also, was that something that you ever addressed with them?
Mm. Yeah, it's such a great question, David, because we know the high percentage of people who deal with families with addiction issues. Any
Right.
kind of addiction does not have to be drug and alcohol,
Mm.
but this is a huge mental health. I mean, addiction is a symptom. It's a way we're trying to self-regulate our nervous system ultimately using things for it, whatever it is, some sort of heightened experience. And this is why I wrote my first memoir, because I really,
Mm.
really wanted to tell our story and really humanize it, especially for fans of my dad, but for anybody who kind of looks up to people. So it created a lot of anxiety for me. Whenever you have to live a double life, there's so much tension in your body because of that, because there's the fear of being found out or my parents being in trouble.
Mm.
And of course, there's the overwhelm of being a small child and not being able to understand what's going on. I'm very empathic, I'm very intuitive, and therefore read a room, right? And know
Yeah.
exactly what's going on and can
Yeah.
feel the tension when I walk in the
Yeah.
house, right? At a pretty early age, and not cognitively or mentally or intellectually understanding any of that.
Mm.
But this is what we do. This is conditioning of the family dynamic. We start to fit in, we start to work it, and we start to find our way in the system. How can I be of help, right? So we became
Yeah.
a very codependent little dance, the three of us, with all of this. My mother eventually got sober. She almost died of alcoholism. She did get sober when I was about 12 years old. My dad got sober too on his own. And both of them were fully sober by the time I was done with high school, basically like
Yeah.
that. But then, of course, I was on my own foray and experimenting with drugs at that point. But we did talk about it, especially when my mom got sober, which was interesting because back then we didn't like have the big family therapy sessions or anything like that.
Mm.
I probably could have used a little Alateen or something like that at that time, but it wasn't happening. It was the 70s.
Yeah.
And we did over the years come together both consciously having conscious conversations, but also, just an ongoing trust and healing process that we went through, forgiving each other, coming clean about things.
Mm.
So it's an interesting thing. But yes, we did heal from it. And my mother was almost 23 years sober when she died. And so we did come to the other side of that for sure.
Well, thank you so much for sharing something so personal that you went through in your life.
And I want to clarify,
Yeah.
there were no conversations going on in high school, just so you know. This
Okay.
came way into my
Wait. Okay.
20s and my
Okay.
30s. No, my high school time, if I can swear, was a shit show. A lot of unconscious behavior. I started smoking pot at 14,
Mm.
doing drugs, with the fast crowd, West Los Angeles, the whole
Mm.
thing. Hollywood kids, a lot of privilege, no rules, no consequences, was a recipe for disaster. And not a lot of
Mm.
my friends did not make it through.
Oh, wow.
I ended up coming out of that, making bad choices in my early 20s. And really, my panic attacks were in my early 20s, from like 20 to almost 35 years old.
Mm.
Really, I was done with it by my mid 30s, it was really on the other side of that. But it was hell. It was hell.
Mm,
And when people read my book, A Carlin Home Companion, my memoir,
mm,
one of the
mm.
kind of the ongoing themes is my dad asking, "Hey, how you doing?" And I say, "Fine."
Right.
And dad's happy with that. End of
That's right.
conversation because he thinks that really is my state, whereas I'm just presenting fine in order not to be a burden. And that's the codependent way. That's the badge of codependency is just keep shoving it all down. And then of course the anxiety and the depression that comes through that. So my 20s were rocky for me, but really by my mid 20s I'd gotten some clarity and my mother was really there for me at that time. That was really when a deep, deep healing happened between my mother and I around that stuff.
Mm. Thank you again for sharing that and clarifying. But despite some of these the difficult times we all have in different ways as a child, you say there were plenty of good times as well. And I'm just kind of curious, what are some of your kind of favorite moments as you were growing up as a child, if you don't mind sharing some of them as well?
Yeah, there's kind of two different types of moments with my family. There was the really quiet at home family moments, and usually in the 70s when I was a kid, I was born in 63, that would be around watching comedy on television. Like to watch that, to watch the Carol Burnett show, my dad crying, laughing at Tim Conway and Harvey Korman, Tim trying to get Harvey to break during a skit. Best time ever. Newhart was another show we watched, the original
Oh
one and the
yeah.
second one. That kind of stuff was really just Carlin family hanging out, watching TV, eating our TV dinners kind of a thing, very, very normal American family, actually. And then the other times, were those really special times when during the summer, my mom and I would get to go on the road with my dad, and we would get to
Oh
go to
yeah.
amazing places and watch my dad do his work on a stage. And we'd travel in a car and go from, gig to gig in New England or something like that and be on the road together, which was always really fun. We kind of, the three of us thrived on that. When I was a baby, I was already on the road with them the first year I was born. So I think it's in my DNA at some point.
Absolutely. And that's a great segue for us because, so for so much of your life, and I think for so many of our listeners right now, they're getting a sense of this. You also have pursued your own career in the arts, but at times you can feel stymied. But you ultimately did find a balance between embracing the name that you have with your father that you were born into and also expressing where people got to know you, right? That
Yeah.
you've talked about and your own creativity. When did you ultimately find that balance and how did you find it?
Boy, like with everything in life, it is a journey,
Mm,
definitely. And I think once I got stabilized mental health wise in my 30s, my mom died when I was 34, almost
mm,
35. So when my mother died, that was a real wake up call. As people
mm,
know, when you go through a big loss like that, the world goes upside down, but there's also a sense of truth that walks into the room.
mm,
There's oh, death is real.
mm,
Oh, tomorrow I could get hit by a bus. Tick
mm,
tock, tick tock.
mm,
Time to get up and these longings and creative urges in you, Kelly. Maybe it's time to start listening to them and just be courageous and brave with it. And so I knew that I was a storyteller and I wanted to tell my personal story. I'm one of those people that I was always in the depths of my inner life and my inner world and fascinated by what makes me tick and what makes people tick, but really felt like I had a very universal story, mental
mm,
health, addiction, making
mm.
crazy choices. I wanted people to know that
Yeah,
we all have this. We're all
that's right.
humans, you guys. That's why my business is called Humans on the Verge. We're all on the verge and we're all humans. So I went down that path, made my dad a little uncomfortable. My dad's a very private person. He never talked about his real life on stage or anything like that, but said, "You have my blessing." But being an only child, being codependent, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to put that on the shelf for a little while. And that's when I went and studied psychology. I got my master's of Jungian psychology at Pacifica Graduate Institute. But then once I was out of grad school, I started doing storytelling around town and found my people, found my
Mm,
community, found a teacher to help me kind of give me the courage to do this and really help me find my
mm,
voice. And I found my voice and I found that I was good at it. I'm a good
mm,
writer, I'm a good performer. That was a real joy. And then when my dad died, I was, the thing about the shadow, we talked about it already.
mm.
Yes, his shadow's still here. He's still my dad and he's still but I emotionally, my
Mm,
codependent self
mm,
no longer had to take care of him
mm,
emotionally, like, oh, I can go tell my story. And I really knew, David, this is when I encourage the people I work with to really trust their gut, to trust what
mm,
their truth is, because I knew, David, that I was gifted with a stage and a name that would
mm,
help more people hear my story, not for
mm,
my ego, not to have some
mm,
sort of skyrocketing success. And yes, I
mm.
have had to deal with my ego and my dream of like, I'll be on Oprah someday. Trust me, we all go there. But really, my heart of heart knew that if I can, we always say it as an artist, if I can reach one person
That's right.
and make them feel less alone in the world about their anxiety or their depression or their crazy family
Mm,
or their fear of letting their creative expression out, whatever it is, I want to invite them to be a human with me. I knew that that was an opportunity after my dad died. A bunch of comedians came into my life. They
huh.
encouraged me. I didn't know comedians before my dad died. My dad was not a social person at all. He was a writer. Uh, I remember my director, Paul Provenza, had said to me, Kelly, you don't need to walk through the fire of this
Mm,
fame thing. You could be an invisible person again. And I just knew that, like, it felt like this karmic thing in my life. Like, if I
mm,
don't walk through the fire and really find out, first of all, A, what is it like to step on a stage that my dad
mm,
occupied? What is it like to be a public person? What is it like to risk my truth in a bigger space? If I never did that, I'd be always obsessed with
mm.
what if, what if, what if. And
Yes.
I knew in my bones that I was going to learn some big lessons, that my ego was going to grow up and be shed, and that, I mean, not completely, we're all here, right?
Yeah.
But it felt like an imperative soul journey for me.
Mm.
And so that's what I'm writing about now, is what is
Ah,
it like when any of us move into spaces that feel dangerous and risky because it might rock the boat in some way. Because, man, if we don't rock the boat for our personal lives or for what we believe in, then we will be on that deathbed and having that regret conversation with ourselves. And I just didn't want to have that with myself.
that is very wise. I want to go back to something because you said something earlier and you said on the verge. And obviously, you've used this term before. So, humans on the verge with your successful podcast that you do that I listen to. So, keep going. And also, but you said this where you said in the past, in your whole life, you felt like you're on the verge. What does that mean to you when you're like on the verge of what? And why do you talk about the term verge?
Yeah, so I see life as a cyclical process,
Uh-huh.
not as a linear path. And so we are always changing. We are always in some stage of metamorphosis. We're
Mm.
either stable and yay, things are good and I know who I am, I know what's going on, or
Yeah.
things are falling apart, sometimes slowly, sometimes quickly, or we're in a mushy in between space between the things that's fallen apart and we haven't
Mm.
figured out what's next. I call that the mushy betwixt in between. Or we're emerging out. And that emerging out part feels like on the verge, right? You feel like you're like,
Got it.
there's something calling me, there's something pushing, it's either pulling me forward or
Mm.
pushing me forward. And I'm not quite formed yet. And we kind of have to step out before we're sure, before we
Mm.
have all the courage. And in general, we are on the verge all the time, David, because our ego wants us to think, oh, yeah, I know everything.
Right.
I've got it handled. But the reality is that we are two different we are a
Mm.
being we are right. We do mindfulness, we do meditation, we get into the
Mm,
mind of
mhm,
the Buddha or whatever you want, the transcendent mind,
mm,
the mind of being. But we are also becoming just like nature. Nature never stops. Nature's always on the verge of its next cycle, its next iteration. Watch any plant, any animal, any
mm,
ecosystem, right?
mm,
So we are always onto something. So I help people kind of identify where they are
mm,
on the journey. I use something called the heroine's journey
mm,
to understand that. And where are you on the journey and how to support themselves and how to prepare themselves for the next part of the journey. Sometimes you need to be stuck for a while in the mush, and sometimes it's courage time and move time.
Well, in terms of your continuing education, you've also gone down and gotten a master's degree in psychology. Can you just kind of walk us through that as well?
Yeah, and that's been almost 20 years, David. It has been 20 years. That's crazy. So I was attracted to Jungian psychology and this
Hmm.
place Pacifica specifically
Hmm.
because, first of all, they had Joseph Campbell's archives. I was already a big fan of Joseph
Hmm.
Campbell. The power of myth kind of opened my mind to comparative religion and archetypes and found that fascinating. And I went to Pacifica because I really wanted to help my storytelling. I really wanted to bring my
Hmm.
storytelling to that level. I ended up getting a degree in counseling psychology. I did not
Hmm.
become a counselor or a therapist. I was an intern to get my hours and
Sure.
things like that. But I knew I would hold space for other people with this kind of
Hmm.
stuff. It's where I learned the heroine's journey. And really, the work that I do now with that work is I help people access the deep imagination, the part of the
Hmm.
personal and the collective unconscious, to help them feel most resourced. I do a lot of work with kind of inner allies, not necessarily
Huh.
internal family system stuff, but it can be
Huh.
definitely personal family dynamic stuff that we deal with. I do a lot of dream work with people. So
Wow.
figures from dreams come in, and it's about having a relationship
Hmm.
and being resourced by these things, and not just from your ego to solve your own life, but to really respect these dream figures and these ancestors and other figures as autonomous and intelligent and wise beings
Hmm.
who have something to offer us. And this work is it's so interesting because it's another way to feel like you are connected to everything and that you belong and
Hmm.
that you are well supported.
So, one of the
Mhm.
things I really appreciate about all this work that you've been doing is you've been talking about unlocking healing and
Yes.
creativity and deeper meaning. And each of these points you've just talked about at some point over the course of our conversation. But I have to admit, as I talk to you more about deep imagination and building a circle of inner allies, all this is new to me. And so
Ah,
for our listeners, and for many of
yes.
them, maybe like myself, who might not be as familiar, what is this all about?
Yeah. First of all, if anyone's doing any plant medicine work out there, any of that kind of journeying, this is the same journey, the same space of the mind you're reaching without the plant medicine.
Hmm.
It's the same space. It's imagination. David, this is the place where an idea will pop into your head suddenly, or an urge, or you have a vision for something. Some people see it visually, some people feel it
Right.
somatically, right?
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
Some people suddenly feel like they need to go move their body. Whatever it is,
All
there's
of the
something.
above.
Right, perfect.
Yeah.
So, but it's an intelligence. It's a
Mhm.
non-egoic, that's all it is. It's not
Mm,
like the personality or the persona that has a reputation and needs to
mm,
be okay in public to look like
mm.
we're this is the whole self, the accessing all of that. And sometimes it's a dream image.
Wow.
Sometimes it's a smell. You smell your grandmother. Oh, I just smell my grandmother's perfume. What would it be like to be in conversation with grandma? And it can sound a little woo for some people, and I totally
Sure.
appreciate that. It's just
Mm,
non-egoic space. It's where the being and the becoming is. And this is hardwired in us, in the whole body and in the mind. And so
mm,
why not in this 21st century, when we are faced as a species with so many challenges, why not activate and have a conversation with an aspect of our own mind that is the keeper of all of that. Einstein would go take a shower to solve a problem. Darwin
Mm,
would go for a walk every day to solve a
mm,
problem because when you daydream, it's the same part of the imagination. This is when the solution arises. This is when the path is the vision comes to you. So let's let the right brain and the left brain talk to each other again
mm,
and really access our full resourcefulness.
mm. That's so insightful. And thank you for sharing that. I now understand it and I totally appreciate it. Um,
Yay!
I um I want to go back to something as we talk about truth telling. And I feel that one of the biggest gifts that your father ever gave me was teaching me to be a truth teller. This is what you said. So this is you
Yeah.
saying this. And
Hmm.
even if he didn't mean to be. So for your dad, that was part of who he was, his art, his comedy, his own self. What does that phrase, though, truth teller, look like for you, though? What does that mean for you?
First of all, telling the truth about your current state and being able to speak that to the people around you so that you can feel connected and belonging and safe. So that's one thing that's super important. And I got that by seeing how hard that was for me as a kid. And then I feel my job at this time in my life is to talk about the things we just talked about, like to talk
Mm,
about the deep imagination and the right
mm,
brain and the stuff that, I get it, can seem a little, and on certain levels, it is too woo and it is a little weird and all of that. And yet, I know the proof is in the pudding because I know when I apply it
mm,
to my life or other people's life or study it, I see the actual impact it has on their life. So for me, it's about let's let's speak our hearts to each other.
mm,
I think the one way we're going to all get through this as a species and certainly as a country is for us to start speaking about our feelings and our hearts
mm,
and where they feel broken and
mm,
where we feel afraid and really greeting people in a warm, welcoming way around that. So that's the personal truth telling. That's so
mm,
important. That's what makes relationships good. That's what makes, our work good, our workplaces good also. And for me these days, it's about being all of me, it's like
mm,
I'm going to be 63 this year. So it's like there's no time to play or BS or to, you know, let's take the mask off. That's always been my invitation is let's take the mask off. Let's meet each other in our humanity. And that's where truth lives. Truth lives
yeah.
there.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to end it with three last questions. I try to do this a little bit of a speed round, but it's not really. So I'll
Great.
I'll I'll end on that note. What's something about you, Kelly, that might surprise people?
That at age 60, after 40 years of not doing it, I got back on a horse and
Oh,
I've
come
been
on.
riding horses the last 3 years.
That is so
I
good. That is
I
so
rode
good.
I rode as a teen competitively
Uh-huh.
until about the age 20, from age 11 to 20. And then for 40 years, got busy with other things. And I'm now back on the horse. And it's profound. It's good medicine.
That's good. We've had many people on this podcast, and that's a first. So thank you for sharing that. You inspire so many. Who inspires you?
A lot of different people. But in particular, I mean, I've got a list, but there's a couple of pictures of some people around my house that inspire me. And one of which is Georgia O'Keeffe.
Hmm.
She inspires me because she was a woman in the early 20th century who had an incredible gift as an artist and
Hmm.
had a very, very, very unique vision. And she went by herself out west, hung out with some other artists back there, out there to New Mexico, when women didn't do stuff like that, and she found her place, and she found the space that fed her, that inspired her, that opened up her genius, and she gave that to herself. She gave herself permission to do that, and she gave herself permission to every day walk her path that fed her artistic desires. And I tip my hat to anyone who's willing to do that in a world that has a lot of rules for us and a lot of shoulds.
And finally, what's your favorite way to recharge?
Such a good question. Certainly riding horses, but
I was
really,
I thought you might go there.
yeah, but I have to say my daily practice is journaling. Journaling
Oh,
helps me recharge. It helps me hear my thoughts out loud, whatever they are, whichever direction. And it has really helped me connect to that wise source within me. And it's where I have full permission to kind of download, whether it's an idea I have or an essay I want to do or some aha I want to write about or something I want to offer to the world. It's my kind of palette where I get to just, be myself fully. The judge is not in the room at all. And I've got a really robust journal practice that really helps my mental health stay good.
that's such a good reminder. Thank you so much for joining us here today on Recharge and for sharing so much of your wisdom and your thoughts. And I just could have kept going here today as I was just enamored with our conversation. To everyone that's just been listening, I hope you've learned as much as I have from this conversation with Kelly. And if you have to, please just continue to subscribe, like, and share this episode. And just thank you again, everyone, for listening. And I'll see you next time on Recharge. Thank you again, Kelly.